Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we make a little bit of podcast history. This is the first time we've ever featured a webinar we recorded, in this case, in late 2020, as a podcast episode. This conversation is all about the value of the Darden MBA and Darden experience for healthcare professionals. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I'm joined this evening by a couple of alumni as well as a couple of our students from our Executive MBA program. I'm excited to have this particular conversation. This is not a webinar topic we've featured before, but we've got a growing interest in, I will say, within our program. It started a healthcare club. You may have seen the email promoting this webinar where we referenced the fact that for our class of 2022, 15% of the students roughly are from pharma, biotech, healthcare backgrounds, which is incredible. We also have a historic, for our program, number of doctors in the program. So seeing a lot of interest from people from this background. So figured there was no time like the present to do this. So I'm going to stop the share here just so that we see each other a little bit better. But I'll give you an opportunity here to meet some of our panelists. So Nicole, if you don't mind, maybe we start with you here. As I mentioned, we're joined by some current students as well as alumni. Nicole, where are you calling from? What's your current role and what's your current class year?
Sure. So I'm calling from Arlington, Virginia. I live down the street from Stan's Family Grounds. My background is I have a MPH in health policy, and I'm a healthcare consultant. I'm mainly focusing in the federal space. And I forget your third question, but I'm a second year, so I'm graduating this May. And I think that hits all your questions.
You got it. That's right. The end is near for Nicole. A couple of quarters to go. You're in quarter 8 right now, correct?
Yep. Yeah. Almost done with quarter 8.
All right. So quarter 9, quarter 10, then the second leadership residency, and then graduation. And so speaking of graduation, we have 2 alumni from the class of 2019 here, Chris Thomson and Leigh Webb. Chris, can I come to you first? Where are you calling from? What's your current role? I already spoiled it and shared your class year, but maybe current role and where you're calling from.
Yeah, sure, Brett. So my current role, I'm the Chief Medical Officer of a health system in Central Virginia. So I'm calling from Lynchburg, Virginia, and I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Centra Health. And I'll stop there. And as you mentioned, graduated May of 19.
Fun fact, Chris was the graduation speaker for his class. Chris, do you remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah. It was fantastic. It seems like so long ago, and the world was very different at that time. But it wasn't that long ago.
Absolutely. I also remember it. You had what, just a couple minutes, right?
I think a couple minutes, I think 5 minutes and no more. I think that was, I think I was told 5 minutes and no more. So I took six and a half minutes.
That's an executive move. I support that.
All right. Can't stop you at that point.
That's right. You're up there. You're talking. Right. So Leigh Webb is also here. Leigh is also a member of the class of 2019. Leigh, where are you calling from and what is your current role?
Yes, I'm calling from Charlottesville, Virginia. The roads to Charlottesville are paved in glue. So I lived here actually during my Darden experience. I actually moved here maybe a month or so after the program started. And I've been here for the past 3 years or so. And currently I'm an assistant professor of emergency medicine at the University of Virginia, but I also do some consulting work on the side as well. And I'm happy to be here along with my distinguished, I should say, panelists here, but also Chris Thomson, who I met on one of the first days at Darden, and we became good friends. We were sort of, I don't know, Brett, do you arrange the groups? Because Chris and I were both ER doctors, and we were in the same group and sort of were, together for 2 years. So
we try to think about some of those things. Admissions and Student Affairs works on the learning teams together. For those of you who are learning a bit more about our program, you have these small teams that are assigned to you, and so Leigh and Chris were on the same team.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
That's great. And so Leigh, you also, give you a brief moment to talk about some of the other things you've been up to. You wrote a children's book recently, right?
I did. I think with the COVID-19 pandemic, I've had my hands in a lot of different jars, and there was so much anxiety and stress at the beginning of the pandemic, and sort of this anticipatory anxiety, like what's coming next, and abrupt life changes, especially for children. So myself and one of my colleagues at the University of Virginia, her name is Dr. Ebony Jade Hilton, along with my sister-in-law, who's an award-winning illustrator, we wrote a book. It's called We're Going to Be Okay. And at this point, it's a free resource. You can go to my website, thegetwellcompany.com, under community resources to see the e-version. And then we printed out about almost 20,000 free copies to hand out to children in the community and across the US at this point. So doing a little bit of everything.
I would say so. Staying busy, which is the recipe for folks in this program, and certainly after the program as well. And
Right.
so thanks for being here, Leigh. And last but not least, Luq, are you there?
Hey, Brett. Thanks
All right.
for having me on. It's a privilege to be with this great group here. I had the chance to meet Leigh and Chris leading up to my start over the last couple of years, as I've been thinking about doing my MBA, and it's cool to see them in person or virtually in person. So I'm currently a medical director for a brand new department of radiation oncology in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I live in DC. And it's my first year in the program at Darden in Roslyn, and I'm a GEMBA student, Global Executive MBA.
And I got to give you a chance to talk about this, Luq. You came to Darden with the idea of starting a healthcare club. I think the club has been started. How's it going?
It's going great. We have a tremendous amount of support from alumni and also from the current students. About 15% of our class are physicians, and beyond that, there's a great number who work in healthcare. And so we're hoping to raise the profile of Darden as a place where we can learn to become thoughtful and strong leaders in this industry that's changing every day. And there's so much to be gained in the classroom experience at Darden, and also beyond through the networking and all the connections. It's not just your class, it's the whole alumni network that's so valuable.
Well, thank you, Luq. I figured we got to talk about the healthcare club as we get started here. So for those of you who are also just starting to learn about our program, we have over 10 student organizations now in the Executive MBA program. We got Nicole is involved, for example, with the consulting club as one of the leaders of that club. And it's exciting. We started with affinity groups, and now we're starting to see some of these professionally oriented groups come up. And that might be a bit surprising for you that we have student organizations in this program, but the reality is the people that choose this program are the kind of people that want to be engaged in the classroom, outside of the classroom. So that brings me to my first question, but I want to make sure for our attendees out there, if you have questions for our panelists as we go along, please just type them in the Q&A box. We will answer them as we can. It's all fair game. Obviously the focus of this is the value of an MBA for someone with a healthcare background, but we have an esteemed group of panelists here who can answer many questions about their Darden experience. So Chris, I'm going to come to you with this question first. How did you decide to pursue an MBA? Is it something you thought about for a while?
Yeah, it is, Brett. And I think for physicians and others in healthcare, there's a lot of different ways that you can go on and get extra experience, extra schooling. And I know from a physician standpoint, and if there are other physicians out there, you can go through professional organizations, American College of Emergency Physicians, American College of Physician Executives, American Academy of Physician Leadership, that can ultimately also lead on to other graduate degree programs. And what I wanted to do was step away from something that was going to be all individuals in healthcare, or specifically all physicians. And part of that was to say, we have been in a spot in healthcare where we need to think differently, and we've had to think differently for the past, many years to be able to provide value to patients and to our healthcare community. And so, being able to step back and say, hey, what are other industries doing? What are people in other companies doing that are not in healthcare was important to me, to be able to bring some of those very different ideas back to healthcare, so that we could just not have groupthink, not be in a room with individuals. I've spent my entire life in rooms with individuals, in school with individuals that are physicians or are physicians since that time. It was an absolute delight to kind of step away from that and see other perspectives. So that was the reason for me pursuing an MBA outside of other forums that were available.
I can understand that. Certainly Darden gives you a great platform for that. Case method learning, experience all the diversity in the classroom, perspectives and backgrounds. Luq, does what Chris just shared resonate with you in terms of your MBA decision? How long did you think about it? How did you ultimately decide this is what I want to do?
So I finished training back in 2011, and I'm a radiation oncologist. And so after about 5 to 7 years, I think most people, regardless of the specialty or what you're doing, you're looking to diversify your clinical experience and take your work beyond like the walls of clinic, because there is a degree or element of burnout that can happen. And I think that, reflecting on it, I think that, it's really important to make sure you work on something that you're really passionate about and interested in, because life is too short, as we all know. And so my passion is in global health. And one of my goals with the MBA is to figure out how to partner with industry to transfer radiation technology and services to underserved parts of the world. And to do that, I think it's important to have some of the business acumen and be able to work with device companies and leaders in healthcare that have similar interests to help the underserved.
I know from our interactions when you're a prospective student, your global interests and wanted to have that sort of broader impact. It sounds like an MBA was something that you felt would really allow you to do that and give you the foundation to do that. Nicole, you had mentioned as part of your story that you had already done sort of one graduate degree, which is not uncommon for our executive MBA students. All of these panelists, for example, did graduate school prior to coming to Darden to do their MBA, and 37% of our most recent matriculated class already had a graduate degree, so it's not uncommon, but you already done something that was health focused, and so now coming back to an MBA program. How did you make that decision?
Yeah, I think my MPH and my first graduate degree was invaluable to my kind of technical expertise and understanding of kind of the policy landscape, also the public health kind of drivers that underpin everything we do and how we look at the world and how we understand problems in the healthcare space. I think for me, though, as I kind of stepped back and stepped away from what I do on a day-to-day for my clients, for my firm that I work at, it became ever increasingly kind of prominent that the landscape is shifting and consumers are actually demanding this shift. I mean, we just kind of finally walked away from a presidential election where healthcare is at the top of folks' minds. It's at the top of candidates' minds. So when you think about how the healthcare system as a whole is continuing and will continue to evolve, I think when I looked at it from that lens, you really have to understand the enterprise perspective, because when we talk about kind of this evolution, what we're really talking about is kind of how we pay for healthcare, how that informs or impacts access. And so, in my world, I think having those business skills and kind of a keen understanding of what that means to operate at an enterprise level helps to inform kind of the recommendations, kind of the work, my own professional development and ability to kind of see kind of C-suite level roles. It helps to understand kind of what is that impact, so you can understand those stakeholders' perspectives. So for me, I thought about it for a really long time. The thought of going back to school yet again, I think is daunting, but it's also very exciting. And I think for me, there was just no better time to do it. And so when I saw that there was this executive format that Darden had, basically, a no-brainer, and it kind of was like the light bulb that I needed to have go off to force me to apply.
Thank you for sharing that. And the enterprise perspective certainly resonates here at Darden. learning to think about, business problems from that C-suite perspective. And so thank you, Nicole. Leigh, last but not least here, had you thought about an MBA for a while, and ultimately what led you to say, this is what I need to do?
I actually had thought about it for a few years. So I'm I guess technically a triple who now, having graduated from Darden in 2019. So when I graduated from medical school in 2009, that was one of the first years that Darden actually had a combined program to get an MD and an MBA, like through the School of Medicine in Darden. And so a couple of my classmates were doing it, and it always piqued my interest. And so I think that's when it started. We didn't have anything like that, no business, no operations, really no innovation. It was very traditional. It was very much so a traditional medical school curriculum. So it piqued my interest, but I just couldn't justify being in school, wanting to go back to school for to continue my education for 2 more years. And I was ready to sort of like fly and leave Charlottesville at that time, to be honest. And so I decided not to do it then, but then it was always sort of in the back of my mind. And I think someone here mentioned sort of the landscape changing over time, maybe Luq and Nicole, but the landscape of medicine and emergency medicine in particular over time has really changed. And so I consider myself a patient advocate, an advocate for underserved communities and populations. And what we see in the emergency department is sort of like the soul of what's wrong in healthcare. And sort of those patients, they come to us, whether it's to refill their medications because they don't have a primary care provider, or they can't afford care, or whether or not they're having an emergency because they can't afford primary care or other things. We just see so many things, gun violence, right? Homelessness, like all of these things that plague our society. And so I sort of saw it in that lens, and I saw myself in a very limited role, being one emergency physician going to a shift and coming home and back again. And at that point, I wasn't really as much so involved in administration. But I thought that I could sort of develop this broad skill set, and it was an amazing experience. I wanted specifically to not do a healthcare MBA, and Darden was an obvious choice for me. One, I was moving back to Charlottesville, but two, just like an excellent program, and I was really looking forward to working with other people. As Chris said, you can learn so much about medicine and different ways to look at things, right? A different lens through these case methods, through talking with classmates from different fields and collaborating with them as well. And so that's that, right? I've taken a little bit of everything, something from my classmates, something from case method, other classes. Medical design thinking is just, one elective that you can take, for instance. And I use that. Now I'm a clinical instructor in the medical design program for medical students. So I'm incorporating that into my role as an assistant professor at UVA as well. There are just so many ways you can incorporate the skills that you acquire at Darden. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about any of those things specifically.
Leigh is a next level panelist, already answered my next question, is sort of the why Darden, which is where I was going. So this is how you know you have a great panel. They anticipate your questions. So Luq, I'm going to come to you for this question. You talked about the arc of your MBA interest, but what ultimately led you to Darden?
Well, when Leigh was talking about healthcare focused versus a broad-based MBA, and how this secular, if you want to say, education can be so valuable for doctors, because we are trained to so much in the technical aspect of medicine, and empathy, however, is such an important trait to have as physicians. And I think being able to put ourselves in the shoes of our thought leaders that we sit with in class is so valuable for us to be able to learn from people who don't work in medicine, to learn how we can really help our patients, the patient experience, and making sure that we offer not just the latest and the best in care, but do it in a way that the patient really feels valued, and to take it just to the next level. And I think that's what I'm learning. I'm just a first year, but there's so much each day. I'm quite thankful that I'm not just surrounded by physicians in the classroom. I mean, I did help start this Executive Healthcare Alliance, but there's a lot, I don't want to minimize the role that people in the classroom who are not in medicine and healthcare play in your classroom experience. It's really valuable. We have military, there's thought leaders in pharma, also there's thought leaders in retail, in car manufacturing, and aviation. These are all industries that science and medicine have learned so much from over the years. And in the classroom, we have these thought leaders.
I love your point about empathy, because I think when I think about this pedagogy and what the case method is about thinking about problems from other people's perspectives, right? So there's how you approach the problem, but the whole value of this whole thing is how other people, learning about how other people approach the problems and what you can glean from that, maybe how that changes your thinking and your approach. I love that point. Nicole, you'd mentioned you're just up the street from Sands Family Ground, so we're your neighborhood business school in some ways, but ultimately what led you to Darden?
I think for me, I was really impressed with the kind of leadership aspect of the program. So not only the global, obviously the case method, but the kind of really thoughtful components of the curriculum that were dedicated to leadership development really stood out to me. And there was this like innate sense of community from like the first time I spoke to you, Brett, and even just other students. Everyone was so welcoming. I know that sounds, it's not, I just felt like it was so unique to this program and this school. And I felt like at Darden, the faculty really stood out to me and have continued to shine throughout my time here. And it really drives home the point that I made the right choice. There's the other students, your classmates, I agree with what's been said about learning from others, but the faculty is world class. And you'll read about it, but it doesn't actually, until you sit in the classroom and you're like, I get it. I get what people are raving about, because it's completely true. And so I think it was those three things that really helped make the decision an easy one for me.
Chris, I'm going to come to you to sort of close off this particular line of questioning. Why Darden for you?
I'll echo certainly all that's been said, and I'll say, on a personal level, and certainly, individuals are going to look and find the best place for them. And I would just say, and I still remember this on my visit to Darden prior to becoming a student, kind of trying to decide what I was going to do, where I was going to do it. It was absolutely infectious in terms of the engagement of the classroom, and it was so notably different than anything else I had experienced in my look around. It made it very clear. So I'm an introvert, and what I was finding was that in large groups, if somebody said something, just like typical introversion, I said, hey, if someone else says something, that's great. And I walked into this class and said, you can't hide here. So there's no hiding, and it's a good thing because it will draw out skills and it will at times make you uncomfortable. But it will absolutely push you to be able to think on your feet, to be able to, come up with thoughts and responses and be prepared at all times in a way that it just wasn't prior to coming to Darden. So that was visible from day one. I'll echo Nicole's, description of the teaching. It just is out of this world, and you can't truly appreciate until, sometimes you'll be going through a class and it'll be a complex topic, or, you need to do some complex organizational change. And you might be kind of going, how is this all coming together? And at the end of class, somehow these professors have the ability to provide this eureka moment that absolutely lets you recognize, wow, they didn't just go, all right, I've got to teach this, and 5 minutes before walk into class. Hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of preparation. I don't want to say hundreds of hours for each class, but the preparation that goes into making this and making you as the student the absolute focus of the outcome that is desired for any particular class or case was just an absolute focus. So that's the reason I came, and that visit didn't even do justice to actually what this place was like.
There's a lot to be said for the group of people who self-select into a program where you're going to have to be an active participant in your learning experience. That makes a huge difference. We talked about it, clubs and organizations and things like that. But this is where the self-reflection, sort of introspection, how do you want to grow through this experience? What's going to stretch you? For most people, at least coming to Darden, it's not just about the technical information. It's not just about the degree at the end. It is about that journey, the other people in the room. And so tend not to be so transactionally oriented and much more about that sort of all in. How do I get the most out of this experience? Leigh and Chris, this is an alumni related question. Leigh, I'll start with you. What is a skill that you use daily within your current role that you gained from the MBA program? You talked a little bit about design thinking, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
There's so much that I use daily, honestly, because I do so many things. I'm doing consulting on the side for a biotech startup. I'm a senior medical consultant for Rubik's LS, and I teach students, right? So I'm like teaching in the leadership. I'm helping to develop a leadership curriculum. So I'm using that. And then I'm not in the C-suite, and I don't really have any aspirations for that, but I am on a number of health systems wide committees where I can act as patient advocates. And all of the things that we learned in strategy, operations, even accounting has been helpful to me. In particular, I can sit in meetings with the CFO and I know exactly what he is talking about. I can completely follow that entire conversation using all of the accounting lingo. And then I can look at the operations, and then I can look from a clinical side and use that to be a stronger patient advocate. And that has served me really well. But every day I use it when I'm teaching medical students in the medical design program or the leadership curriculum. I mean, there are just so many ways to use your skills from Darden. I'm sure Chris can give you a better view of what that looks like from like the C-suite.
Yeah, Chris, what would you say? I mean, I appreciate your answer, Leigh. It's hard to say one thing. It sounds like many, many things, Chris. I wonder, when you think about what you've gained, is there something that you use on a regular basis?
Yeah, Leigh, I feel like you sort of almost self-admitted you were waffling on the question. I don't think you were, though. I mean, I wish I could say there was a single, wow, it's easy to use your evaluation of company skills or your accounting skills or developing strategy skills. But I'm going to agree with Leigh. It's sort of all of those things and being able to talk to other individuals who that is what they do. And you may or may not have the in-depth knowledge that a CPA and a CFO of a health system has had for, that's been working for 30 years has, but wow, can you carry on a conversation and do what you need to do, which is be able to, understand a project, define a project, and carry it through with your ultimate goal, which is really to be able to influence others and to move balls forward. And so I'm going to agree with Leigh. It's all of those things, and it's being able to incorporate knowledge where prior to coming to Darden, you would always say, I'm not going to jump into this conversation because there's a significant piece of it. I may know 90% of it, but there's a significant piece that's a void. And you were always kind of hesitant to go, oh my gosh, I don't understand, this accounting principle that's key to this conversation. And what I feel now is, wow, I may not know every little piece of information, but such a broad, a broad swath of just disciplines and subjects, and then you can use those to influence and to move balls forward. So I think agree a little bit with Leigh in that it's the whole. It's being able to put it all together, and then the absolute focus that Darden has on influence and leadership and soft skills to bring all those, those objective abilities home, I think has been the real benefit post Darden for me.
In many ways, it's a communication-based MBA program, right? Because that's what you're doing in class. You're having to explain your ideas in a way that is hopefully compelling to the other people in the room. So Nicole, you talked about doing MPH and then an MBA. We have a question here about a MSHA versus an MBA. And I wonder how, I'm sure you talk to people about this all the time, how you think about doing something that might be more specialized versus an MBA, which tends to be more generalized. How do you help people think through that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that one is less important than the other. I think they're just very different. And so if you're looking, for a broad-based kind of view of business, I think the MBA is like critically important. For me, I'm putting some of these skills to use every day. So often I'm asked to deal with high levels of uncertainty and to operate and make decisions under like heavy uncertainty or ambiguity. And it's not just impacting myself or my team, it's ultimately impacting the client one and down the line providers and patients. So these are very high stakes decisions. And I don't think that's something that I was able to learn in my first graduate program. That was, again, more focused on kind of the science, public health kind of principles and those types of things. So it's just very different, and it's a shifted mindset that I think teaches you how to be resilient. There's this past summer I helped my practice to kind of think through and develop our organizational purpose statement. And ironically, I just drafted my individual purpose statement in our business ethics class with Professor Andy Wicks. So it's just kind of these things you're learning at Darden that you might not have known that you would have needed those skills, but it's day-to-day enhancing what you're doing, either in your current role or any opportunity that you're trying to pursue in the future. So I think I think they're different, and one is more technical than the other, but an MBA is very technical. Obviously, we touched on accounting and finance. Those are your kind of heavier quant courses. So you're still going to get those data analytics, and all of the other kind of leadership skills, all of those kind of skill sets through the program. But hopefully that answers their question.
Thank you, Nicole. And there's many different paths. Darden and a Darden MBA is certainly a path, but it's all about picking the path that is right for you. And hopefully, this webinar is starting to give you a sense of why people choose this particular program. I want to ask something that's come up here in the chat about applying the MBA post-graduation, sort of about how your career goals may have changed or evolved over the course of your time. Luq, I recognize it's early days, but you just had the professional advancement course with Connie Dunlop in Q1. What was that class like? I will say, for those of you who listen to the podcast, or even if you don't listen to our podcast, it is the #1 course mentioned on the podcast by everybody. How was PAC?
It was great. I think the faculty are amazing at Darden, but to be honest, I already kind of expected or knew that walking in, because I just hear every single alumnus that I speak to is telling me that, and I myself have experienced that. But what was really great about professional development was learning from my classmates about their interests and what drives them. And I think it's very inspiring. For physicians, we can become stagnant, and this MBA kind of helps you snap out of it. Like, there's more to our careers and what we are doing every day in the clinic. Our potential is endless or limitless. We need to aim higher. I think I'm learning that from my classmates quite a bit. I think that we should shoot for the sky. It's very inspiring to be in PAC, and that's what I felt. I think just hearing some of the personal stories, you become really quite engaged with your classmates about their backgrounds and the diversity in their work experience. And I think that I find that really motivating.
It's nice to have the course up front in the program, because in Q1, it used to be in the middle of the program, which I think most people would say is maybe too late. Like, this is, this beloved class, and to ask all these big questions about who you are and where you're going. And as you note, Luq, you get a chance to hear about everybody's perspectives and what are you doing, and why are you here, and what do you want to get out of this? And it helps you build those connections.
Right. I mean, it's normal in the beginning. I think, Nicole, you definitely are more closest to it, as I am currently going through it. It's stressful in the start of an MBA, and you have your full-time job. And I think some of PAC can be, when you have it earlier on, is that you share in some of the common stressors that are occurring. And then you kind of take the big picture point of view, because you understand the stressors are there. School, it can be really tough at this stage in our lives. but then PAC reminds you about some of the long game, like the sky view, and that's really important, I think, not to lose sight of that.
I like that point. Yeah, Nicole, please go ahead.
I would just add, there's literally no other time where you actually sit down and like draw out the journey of that which your career could take. So it's something you hear a lot if you have mentors and like colleagues or friends you speak with about your career trajectory, but you don't you kind of hear it, it goes in one ear and out the other. But this course actually forces you to think very much and self-reflect about kind of where joy meets professional development and that intersection of kind of that, what is the life that I want to take on and how does my career kind of feed into ultimately what's going to drive my purpose. I think that was what stood out to me about that class, is that I'd never taken the time to really map that out. And I think that was really critically important, to your point, Brett, about having it up front.
Right. One more thing, Brett, is that we have PAC in the middle of like decision analysis, global economics, and then you have PAC. So I think, I bet you in 6 months when I look back, at the end of the first year, I'll even be more thankful for the time I spent in PAC and some of that. But it's hard, you can get easily caught up in the coursework and some of the difficult challenges that you can face, not understanding accounting, which I have in about 20 minutes. So yeah, I bet you, like Leigh and Chris, when you look back at your time at Darden, you probably are even more thankful the further out you go.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll put it a couple ways. I'm actually jealous of you that are current students, going through this again, in a way. So I think that's fair to say, that the skills that you learn. But I'll tell you, I'm looking and going, hey, you guys are experiencing this right now. I'm a bit jealous.
I agree. I'm a lifelong learner. So I loved being at Darden. I loved being in school. And after those 2 years, it's actually forced me to try to fill that void by finding creative and innovative spaces in medicine. Because when I was at Darden, I was like, the world is full of endless possibilities and we get to collaborate with all these really cool people. It's very different from me, even coming from emergency medicine, where we do a fair amount of collaborating with other people within the health system. So it was just this amazing, wonderful experience. And when it stopped, I was like, oh, what am I going to do to learn? So I'm like, ordering a subscription to Harvard Business Review and, doing all these things. But ultimately, it's sort of pushed me in the direction of like finding more creative and innovative spaces within medicine, working with startups, continuing to have those sort of interprofessional collaborations as well. And Connie is wonderful. We took PAC, which was a little later, but then I also took a coaching class that she did where, I don't know if Darden still has this, Brett, you can speak to this, but they taught us how to coach as sort of middle managers, or in some cases being in the C-suite. And also we received a coach who helped us in terms of our own careers. And that was really a life-changing experience for me. Even though Connie wasn't my coach was absolutely wonderful. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, we still have leadership coaching. It's out there as an elective, very popular elective. So Leigh, you kind of opened the door to this, and I want to give you and Chris a chance to speak to this. You both are entrepreneurially oriented. Chris, you seemingly have startups going, a lot of different ideas that you're pursuing. Leigh, you also have an idea that you were working on. Paused it for a second. Did you imagine, Chris, when you came to the program, that you would kind of go in this direction? And maybe tell us a little bit about, are you working on something currently? What are you working on currently?
Yeah, sure. So, and I came in a little bit like we've just heard too, having had two companies that I'd started. One was an international company that sort of provided healthcare services around the globe. And so I did come in thinking, all right, this is, entrepreneurship is certainly something that I'm very interested in. I will just say right now, I've, gotten together with two classmates. And so we are pretty early in a new venture. And we're probably about 4 months in. We're ready to make a monetary ask, and you will absolutely it is this fertile ground to meet folks, to come together and, think of ways to solve problems and make the world a better place through sustainable business. And if you don't experience that, even if you didn't come in with that as one of your goals, then your head's down and you're not looking around and talking to folks, because there are individuals just looking to build something special every day.
I appreciate you sharing that. And of course, we also have an entrepreneurship club. While we're talking about clubs, that is one of the clubs that we have. Leigh, had you been entrepreneurially inclined? Was this a new thing?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it coming in. So I was a flight physician a few years ago. And so I talked to my friend who is a critical care nurse and another friend who is a pilot retiring from the military about starting an air ambulance company. And so we were like, well, somebody has to go to business school. That's a pretty big endeavor and that's a lot of money. And so I came in sort of with that in mind. And ultimately, I mean, it definitely is not the same as sort of startup field. It's like a very much so an established industry, and you do X, Y, and Z, you get into it and so on and so forth. There's nothing really innovative about it right now. But we decided to not do that because of sort of the state of the field. And then I kind of didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur, but was enjoying the journey at Darden until the last quarter. I took an entrepreneurship class. And in that class, we had to come up with our ideas. We had to come up with business plans. We had to pitch our ideas. And I pitched my idea to the class in a semi-serious way, but then people came up to me afterwards and they were like, oh, we want to invest. Let us know. Are you actually going to do this? This is an amazing idea. And so there was a lot of momentum there. Now, since that time, I worked on it for a bit. And then since that time, the pandemic hit and some other things have sort of put that on hold, because I'm also doing virtual schooling for my kids. And my husband was in a very busy job. But I do still feel that entrepreneurial spirit in me. And that really came out of my time at Darden. I didn't go in with that excitement, that same excitement about innovation and sort of that the startup culture in life. So I hope to get back into it soon. And until then, I'll continue to consult and find those creative spaces in medicine.
I appreciate that. And certainly an interest that I have, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I mean, people come with these backgrounds and then all of a sudden you have the MBA and you have this business training, and it sort of opens what you feel is possible for yourself. And you feel like the skill set that maybe you were lacking, you can do it. You also have a network of people available to you. If you have questions, things come up, classmates to collaborate with, and so many different things. So entrepreneurship, which once maybe felt like something other people did or maybe less accessible, now it's very accessible. So thank you. And Leigh,
can I just add one more thing about accessibility? There's also a brand that comes with Darden that I wouldn't say I underestimated it, but as an alumnus, when someone says, oh, you went to Darden, like you went to business school and you have this, that actually opens like the door to consulting for me, to talking to people who are doing startups, to getting in those innovative spaces, not just because I have the MBA, but because that MBA is from Darden and people recognize that and respect that. So I would say in terms of opportunities, that has been great as well.
Nicole, I'm going to come to you. What advice would you share for prospective students who are on this call tonight, learning a bit more about the program? What advice would you share with them, particularly as they think about taking this next step in their career?
I think there's probably two pieces of advice, and one's kind of pre-matriculation as you're still kind of deciding, is that don't let the fear of the unknown or fear of what you've heard about business school kind of dissuade you from coming, because it is completely doable. I'm a consultant. Of course, we are notorious for working long hours, but I'm still able to do the schoolwork and also kind of take on leadership roles, within the student community. And that actually speaks to my second piece of advice, which is, if you decide to do this, like really lean in to the opportunity, because I think what many of us are saying here is that you not only are learning from other experts in their own field, sitting in the classroom with them, you have amazing faculty. There's so many opportunities. Like, I think Brett mentioned, I saw a gap in terms of, hey, we should have a consulting club for EMBAs. And so I started one, with some other students in my class. And that's just like the the mindset, that Jeffersonian, student-led, kind of take initiative, do whatever it is you think would be value add. And I think that is part of not only the joy of coming to Darden, but it's really an opportunity in a low stake environment to grow your leadership skills. And I think that's been supremely valuable to me. And I'm so glad that I did it. But I think that's what I would drive home to you is really take advantage and just know that you can do it. And those of us on this call, plus thousands of others who have come before us, will support you along the way.
Thank you for those points, Nicole. And I do want to just underscore that sort of all-in mentality. If you're going to do this, you want to get the most value out of it. And it came up in one of our recent podcast conversations with one of Nicole's classmates, Clarissa. And she was saying, I knew that this was going to be hard to what Luq was talking about earlier, but I knew that I was going to be challenged by it, but I still wanted to get everything out of it. And I'm participating in organizations and doing all this stuff while having this really busy and full life because, well, really only get to do this one time. So why not make the most of it? So Chris, coming to you, advice that you would share with our prospective students on the call this evening.
Yeah, I would just say, don't, same. I think don't be intimidated by the thought of going back to graduate school, and just understand that I think coming to Darden is not it's not I'm going to go get knowledge and then use that knowledge to go on and do something different, via, these new skills that I've gotten. It truly is a life-changing experience. And I think what I would anticipate is, if you feel like the rest of your life is planned out in some way, or you think you know what you're going to do, I would just say things likely will change entirely for the good after coming to this program. So be prepared be prepared for personal and professional transformation, and also be prepared to meet some of the best friends that you're ever going to have for the rest of your life. So I look at Leigh Webb, who I've spent, for those 2 years, we're in the same learning team. And, I consider Leigh one of my best friends right now, and, have met her family. And it's just, you will develop some really, really special relationships.
Absolutely. And that is one of the many values of this experience is the people you get to know along the way. Have 135 plus classmates that are all there, and you're going to be challenged together. You're going to learn together. You're going to learn from each other. So many different things. Luq, a piece of advice that you would share with our prospective students?
Well, I think that for physicians especially, it's really important for us to be at the table during this ever-changing healthcare environment. And the experience that you'll get at Darden will certainly help you do that. And so I think don't shy away, like each of us at the table today are telling you, keep reaching higher. And I think you won't be let down by what Darden has to offer. So my advice is just to do what feels right and aim for the best. And I think I'm confident to say that you'll get that at UVA Darden.
Thank you, Luq. And Leigh, any thoughts you'd like to share? I appreciate all the notes that have been struck here about, don't be intimidated by it, because I think oftentimes people worry, I don't have the right background, or I haven't taken accounting, finance. Let me just say very clearly from an admissions perspective, that's okay. And many of our students do not have that in their background before coming to Darden. That's the reason why they've chosen Darden, because they know they're going to have this core curriculum where they're going to be exposed to what I kind of call the greatest hits of business school, these sort of core topics: accounting, finance, decision analysis, global economics, all of this kind of stuff.
Just to piggyback off what you were just saying, it's no man or woman left behind at Darden. Like, if you want to be there and you're willing to do the work, you will get through the curriculum. I went to medical school. I have done hard things before, but I was intimidated a little with accounting and some of these other classes. And ultimately, I was fine and ended up enjoying the classes because the professors are amazing, and because a lot of it is case method and we work in small groups. And so Chris and I were in that same class class with one of our classmates who was like fluent in Excel. And I was like, what do you mean put a comma here? I've been working on this for an hour. And then the group sort of saw me grow over time with my Excel skills. And that was good as well. I would say, as a piece of concrete advice, talk to as many people as you possibly can. You can reach me through Brett. He can easily reach me, Chris, Luke, Nicole. I'm sure all of us on this panel, but there are also many, many, many other people that you can talk to. And it's hard to sort of capture everything that Darden or that an MBA just in general will give you in 1 hour. And you may not even have all of your questions formulated at this time. But if you talk to enough people at Darden, you will get a vibe, and that's a sense of a Darden family, as well as some of the more technical pieces. But we don't shy away from talking about our experiences at Darden. We don't shy away from, alumni or potential candidates or potential students who reach out to us. You will find that we are very friendly and welcoming in terms of questions. So do that as much as possible for every school, but just know that if you do choose Darden, I do believe you will have quite a transformative experience. I would agree with Chris in terms of naming my experience at Darden as very transformative.
And that was our webinar and podcast all about the value of the Darden experience for healthcare professionals. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.